Now it's time to fill out some forms, and we'll be doing this, filling out the handout as we go along. And again, appreciate you watching this today. Appreciate you deciding to make a difference and matter in the lives of a kid. So let's just start with the what. What is mentoring? Mentoring is a one-on-one relationship where an adult serves as a source of influence, friendship, and discipleship to a youth. Now, not all engagement with youth is mentoring. For example, you could be a coach, and that would be a great thing, or you could be a Boy Scout leader, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you're being a mentor. You're being a positive influence. But by our definition of a mentor is someone who intentionally has a one-on-one relationship with the goal of being an influence and friendship and discipleship for an individual youth. Why do we do it as individuals? Well, according to Chap Clark, who is one of the leading authority on youth development in America, he said it takes 5 significant relationships with adults who are not family members for youth to thrive. And he and I had a discussion once. And I said, Chap, if you don't have 2, how can you have 5? And that's why mentoring is so important, is before you can get to that 5 significant relationships, we need to get to one relationship with a mentor. You would not be who you are today without mentors. Now, when I was growing up, we never called people mentors. We didn't have big brothers and mentoring programs. But we had people who come into our lives, into my life, and was very intentional with me. So I want to ask the question, and on your handout, I want you to write out, you have 3 different blanks. Who mentored you? Who was the one who was intentional? It could have been a granny, it could have been a neighbor, it could have been a coach, it could have been a Sunday school teacher. But who helped you become who you are today? And when you're done here today, you ought to just send them a thank you note. Here's what I tell people today. It's not every kid that we mentor will be successful, but every successful child will have had a mentor. In America, our kids are greatly relationally under-resourced. Recently, I was in Peru, and while I was there, we helped build a house for a family. And the little 4-year-old daughter, I asked her, could I see her toys? And she brought out a Lego piece. And in my house, we have Lego pieces quite a bit. And with my kids, I used to say, if you don't pick them up, we will throw them away. And so every Lego piece was picked up at least one time. And so I'm used to seeing Lego pieces everywhere. And in fact, I've probably thrown away several hundred. But I was expecting her to bring out another Lego piece. And that was her collection of toys, was a single Lego piece. But little Maria had an incredible family that loved her. And what I took away, my great takeaway from my trip there, was that in America, our kids, even our poorest kids, are materially rich, but they're significantly relationally under-resourced. Whereas in other countries, they may be materially under-resourced, but relationally rich. So our kids that you'll be connected with, some will have more than others, but most of them will be significantly relationally under-resourced. And you get to help change that direction, that resource in their life. Why do we do it as a program? We do it because there's a crisis of fatherlessness. Now that word is not a real word, it's a rise up word, because most children know who their father is. It's just not part of their life. According to the most recent research by Child Trend Organization, 40% of youth will be born to unwed moms this year. In 2011, 47% of homes with poverty was headed by moms with no spouse. 63% of youth suicides are from fatherless homes. 85% of all children who show behavior disorders come from fatherless homes, 20 times the average. 80% of rapists comes from fatherless homes. 71% of all high school dropouts come from fatherless homes. Children are desperately crying out, I need a father in my life or a father figure in my life. The next reason that we as a program, we as Rise Up does mentoring, because there's a biblical call to it. If you look at the different verses here, you have Psalm 68:5, a father to the fatherless, a defender of widows, is God in his holy dwelling. He has compassion. He repairs brokenness. Isaiah 58:6-12. Loose the chains of injustice. Untie the cords of the yoke. Set the oppressed free. Share your food with the hungry. Provide the poor wanderer of shelter. You will be called the repairer of broken walls. And that's what we do, is that we try to repair the broken walls in our children's life. And it's totally fascinating that our church is losing our youth. 70% of church youth today will not be in church by age 25. Deuteronomy 6:5-7 says, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength. These commandments I give you today are to be upon your hearts. Impress them on your children. Talk about them when you sit down on the road. And so the whole idea is to regularly be talking to God about, regularly be talking to children about God, so they see that it's not just something we do on Sunday. I often apologize to teenagers when I speak with them that so many, me and my generation, has treated the relationship of God as something, as an add-on, as something that we only do on Sunday. And the last reason that we do mentoring here at Rise Up is the heart of the ministry. When you look at God's relationships, it's all about relationship and connections. God and Adam, when you look at the backstory there, it was God would come down every day and just communicate and associate with Adam. You look at Jesus and his disciples. He was God in flesh, but yet he walked, he laughed, he cried, he partied, he challenged, he got impatient, he empathized. And one of my favorite verses is Hebrews 4:15. For we do not have a high priest which cannot identify with our problems, but in all of his points was tempted like we are, yet he did not sin. So it's Jesus was at his heart. He was a mentor to his disciples, and at his heart, he still cares about our problems and who we are. Understanding your match. It starts with your worldview. What is a worldview? And we all have one. The overall perspective from which one sees and interprets the world, or simply put, how we understand the world around us. When you work with kids, you have to think cross-cultural. When I was young, and probably when you were young, your parents said, oh, it's a little bit different today than it was used to. Things slightly change, but all things are all the same. But I'm telling you today, today's generation, today's kids 16 and under, they have a world that you never experienced. They have never lived their life apart from a screen. They have never lived their life apart from the internet. They will not see the world as you do. We all have our own world view. And understanding ours will help understand others. But that's okay. Kids are wonderful about accepting people with different worldviews as long as you do just a few things. This is mentoring's hidden secret. You will learn just as much from them as they will learn from you. And secondly, you can't screw this up. If you're humble, if you're teachable, and if you're prayerful, you cannot screw up. This is the only guaranteed ministry going that if you're humble, if you're willing to learn about and from, and willing to pray before you engage, your kids will invite you on this journey that would be amazing and life-changing for them and you. They have invited you to go on a journey in their world. To go on a journey, it requires a destination. The agreed upon destination is that regardless of outcome, the child upon adulthood will know that you accepted, loved, and tempted to influence them as Jesus does. You are not a change agent, but a merchant of hope. And to get to this destination, our agreed upon destination, you need to adjust your expectations. The primary reason mentors fail is that they expect or demand change in a short time. Parents have 18 years and we have an hour a week, yet we expect results in this short time, which is an amazing idea when you think about it. Only God can change people. If we own the process, we will burn out. And I don't know about you, but I make a terrible God. Your goal is to be a cheerleader first and a guide second. They have multiple voices of authority, but few voices of cheerleaders or guide. One of my favorite speakers is Josh Shipley, and I urge you to watch his TED Talk. And he says every kid is one caring adult away from being a success story. And you could be that caring adult. Be a kid whisperer. Listen first. Seek to understand, not lecture. And the key to listening is to tune in and lend an ear, which is eye contact, attend to cues, ask questions. And you may have to ask the questions again, not necessarily demand answers, and then respond accordingly. And have empathy. Empathy, according to Atticus Finch from To Kill a Mockingbird, is you never really fully understand someone. This is from the scene where he's talking with Scout about she didn't want to go to school and how her teacher was very mean. And Atticus says to her, you never fully understand someone until you crawl inside their skin and walk around in it for a while. And for our kids, we need to crawl inside their skin and just try to understand their world. Now Jesus, he was the greatest empathizer. He always looked beyond the action and saw the person. For example, the woman at the well, when she had spoke to him, well, he had actually spoke to her first, and which was totally forbidden. And she was a wounded, broken woman. And he looked beyond her and saw her for what she was. For he was, according to Hebrews 4:15, he could empathize with our weakness. He knows who we are and how we are. And lastly, you've just got to have fun. You can be their best friend, but not their peer. They are not looking for another peer. They don't need another them. They need a grown-up who doesn't need them but yet loves them, who will give them new adventure, give them new opportunities. If a kid says that's dumb, and they will when you say, let's go do this activity, and they've never done it before, it just simply means they've never experienced it. And how you get around that sometimes is if you just ask a kid, hey, I really like to play putt-putt, and I really want to play. Will you go with me so I can play putt-putt? Or you fill in the blank for whatever. Most kids will say, I don't want to do that if they've never done it, so they won't feel embarrassed or feel inadequate. So it's part of your mission on a journey is to create new adventures and new opportunities. And lastly, just believe the best. Just look for it even in the worst. Most kids that we work with come from broken families, broken situations, and who knows what they saw that morning or that day or the day before. And they often are just doing the best they can. It could just be that day at school, someone made fun of them for something they were wearing or something they had or didn't have. And so their reaction is that it takes a while to come back from that. So just believe the best in your kid because they need you to be their cheerleader, to be their guide, to believe in them even when they don't believe in themselves. So just believe the best. In summary, adjust expectations. Be their cheerleader first, guide second. Listen, empathize, have fun, and believe the best. Part 3, principles and methods for being an effective mentor. You can be a bad mentor. The reason mentors fail, first is inconsistency. The most consistent thing in their lives are inconsistent adults. The second reason mentors fail is being judgmental. You conflict with their parents' values. Never tell a kid what their parents are doing is wrong, even if you think they are wrong. Third reason is we are change ninjas. We want to go in and a few kicks and punches just change the situation. The fourth reason mentors fail is that they take on a parental authoritative role. They want to tell the kid how things ought to be, what they should do, should not do. Fifth reason is what I call phone worship. When they're with the kid, they're continually looking at their emails, their text messages, and so forth. And what you're communicating to the child is that you are not as important as the gadget in my hand. Now, in their world, they love the gadget, but more importantly, they love being loved. And so when you're with them, you must put the phone away. The next reason that mentors fail is being inauthentic. You and I have perfect days. You will have days when life is tough. And it's okay to tell the kid, I'm not having a good day. It's okay to tell the mentor, tell the child that I had an argument with my boss or with my child. It's okay because children have an amazing capacity to recognize people being inauthentic and having bad motives. And the last reason that mentors fail is that they avoid the advice of Rise Up staff, that we tell you very specific things to do and not do, and you do or don't do those things. So it's real important that when we ask you not to do this or not to say this thing, that you don't do that. So let's look at getting started. First thing is always be prepared. When you go pick up your child, Fred, we'll say Fred, when you go pick up Fred, you need to have a plan to go to the movies, go throw a ball, go mow the yard, go do something. You could always change the plan. But if you get there and you say, Fred, what do you want to do? And Fred says, I want to go to the mall. Well, you say, well, that's not a good idea. Well, it's not fair to Fred that you said, what do you want to do? And then said, well, we can't do that. Secondly, is get to know your mentee. Get to know what he likes, what he doesn't like, and that comes with time. It's find their interests. I am convinced that every child has a passion. It may not be discovered yet, but find what they like, what artists they like, what movies they like, what games they like to play, what's their hobbies. And a lot of kids really don't have hobbies today, but find their interests, find their hobbies. And start simple. For boys, they've got to be doing something. Activity leads to conversation with boys in particular. Now, the first few times will either be a honeymoon, chaos, or shutdown. Those are your three options. Not that you get to choose it, it will just happen. But the first few times, they will either be so glad to see you, or they will go, I really don't want to do this. And part of that is testing to see if you're authentic, if you're going to come back. Or thirdly, they'll shut down. They won't say a word or very few words. Their answers will be yes, no to questions. And I can tell you, I've seen it by dozens of times. Those kids who do the shutdown will tell their mentor coordinator they had the best time ever. And their mentor will go like, really? I didn't experience that. I didn't see that. And so your kid for the first few times will be just so happy to see you, or not happy to see you, or get in the car and not say much. And that's all three of those are normal responses. But sooner or later, you will have messes. Mentoring is messy. No messes, no mentoring, because life is messy. Relationships are just messy. But looking at this chart, if you learn nothing else from this whole PowerPoint, is learn this chart. Trust and time. If you look at the solid thick line, you see healthy youth. They just start out here and they continually go higher and higher and higher. As the trust level goes up, as time goes on, youth who comes from solid, grounded families, youth who are solid, grounded, whether they come from healthy families or not, they just start low in time and trust. They go really high. Then you look at needy youth. They are your honeymoon kids. They start out really high, then something happens where you maybe don't show up because of an emergency or some kind of situation. Something causes them to go back down, and you have to almost start over again. And they'll keep doing that zigzag up and down until they get moved from needy to more healthy. And then you have the hurting youth, which is a lot of our kids. It takes you a long time for their trust level to go high. But once it does, it goes quick and it goes exceptionally high, perhaps even higher than healthy kids. So one of your kids will be either one of those three situations. All kids need face time, F-A-C-E. They need fun. Most kids assume that adults are boring, and the truth is a lot of us are, but we can be fun. They need acceptance. Acceptance doesn't mean approving everything, but it does mean listening without judging. You certainly should teach values and certainly should teach right and wrong, but only as they open a door for you. Consistency. Be there, be real. Expectation. To believe the best in them. Let's look at some whatabouts. Now, obviously, we are a faith-based organization and God is part of our narrative. So let's look about what about God? Actions speak louder than words. From Paul, he said, we are gentle among you, like a mother caring for her little children. For you know that we dealt with you as the Father deals with his own children, encouraging, comforting, and urging you to live lives worthy of God. So there's two essential characteristics that we can draw from this: faithfulness and perseverance. And these are louder than words. You have the maturity dilemma. We forget what it's like to be a kid. We try to talk kids into changing. And we resort to the don't do what I did or do what I did and everything will be all right stories. Every event doesn't have a happy ending. Every event doesn't resolve itself in the next day or the next month or even next week. Sometimes it takes a long time. So we need to nurture truth and love. We need to listen rather than lecture, pray rather than worry, forgive rather than ferment, and believe rather than badger. And remember, God will work. When you feel ineffective, God is still effective. And leave the results to God. God opens doors. You don't need to force the door open. Pray for God to open hearts. Be patient. Seize God's opportunities by asking questions, introducing them to other Christians, bringing them to non-threatening church events. Don't be a know-it-all, because see, the older I get, the less I know. I'm more certain of what I know, but the less I know. And it's in this complex, changing world, our responses that we would have had 20 years ago may not be sufficient and may need to be fleshed out more. Lastly, give God's response. Always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you to give the reason for the hope that's in you. But do this with gentleness and respect. Some more what-abouts. What about parents? Because you will see your parents as often as you see your kids, not as long as, but as often as. Some parents become defensive. Your kid will go back and say how wonderful you are, and it may make that parent feel defensive or feel insufficient. But how you overcome that is just show respect to the parent. Inform them of where you will go, ask permission if that's okay, and let them know when you will return. Don't speak negative about the parents to the child, because they will repeat this sooner or later to the parents. Some parents are hopeless and lonely. Therefore, they will want you to be their friend. And you can be friendly, but it's very difficult to be the mentor and to be the friend, a deep friend to the parent in a short amount of time. Some parents are overwhelmed. Therefore, be compassionate, but don't be drawn into their problems. Remember your role. You're a friend to your match. Don't become another parent. And definitely do not give money. If you give money to the parent, you will alter the mentor relationship for the worse. The parents have been told that they cannot ask you for money. So when you say we can't do this, but I can talk to the mentor coordinator, that's okay. They know that you cannot give them money. The key, again, to parent relationships is respect the parent-child relationships. Focus on your relationship with the child. If you have any problems, notify your ministry, your mentor coordinator. What about physical contact? Studies shown it's absolutely essential for kids to have physical contact. It stimulates cortisol in the brain. It stimulates other chemicals in the brain that makes them feel happy, feel better about themselves. But We have to be wise in how we do our physical contact. And so I call the big five. Give a fist bump. Give a dap. If you don't know what a dap is, ask your kids. High five, side hug, handshake, or even make up your own. But you need to be giving them physical contact, but you have to have discretion in how you do it. And with the parents, just shake their hand. What about problems? And you will have problems. How do I handle problems? First of all, confidentiality. You never promise absolute confidentiality. You never keep secrets that can harm, such as someone's being hurt, someone is planning to hurt others. Now, fun secrets do help relationships. For example, if Fred says, I like Sally, but she doesn't know it, that can be your secret that adds to your relationships. Or Fred says, I really like dancing, but my friends will make fun of me. Well, that's a secret that adds value to the relationship. But if it's about someone being hurt or planning to hurt others, you cannot promise confidentiality. Then there's appropriate confidentiality. You keep personal matters private. You don't speak to families about your issues at home. You don't share the family's problems with other friends or church unless you're trying to help them solve a problem. You just share the problems with ministry staff alone. What about suspected abuse? State laws require us to report any reasonable cause to suspect abuse. If a child discloses abuse, go to bat for them. Believe what is said. Affirm your concern for the child and tell your ministry, your minister coordinator, your mentor coordinator. And how do I know if there's abuse or neglect? Well, first of all, if you see bruises and unusual patterns, or if they're secretive about it, if there's a consistent lack of food, clothing, or shelter, now you have to understand there's a difference between your standards and the family standards. The family may not be the neatest family. They may live on junk food. They may not spend a lot of money on clothes, so forth. Those are things that we prefer to be better, but does not necessarily mean that they are being neglected. Being neglected is a continual source where the kid's always hungry, or the kid may not have utilities, etc. Those could be signs of neglect. If a child is consistently or severely threatened by the family, that could be neglect as well. Just tell your ministry staff about it. What about problems between kids and parents? Do you think that there'll be problems between kids and parents? If you have a kid, you know there's problems between kids and parents. And that's normal. That's not abnormal. Most kids feel negative about their parents from time to time. A friend of mine, one of the wisest men I ever met, said most kids lie and make excuses. So you have to understand when kids are talking about their parents, that often that is not the complete truth. Or if a parent has given them consequences, the child will make excuses. You cannot be drawn in. You have to learn to discern. If they complain about their parents, you simply say, I'm sorry, tell me more. How can I help you get through this? If you say anything about the parent, at some point or another, the kid will repeat it. It could be that the kid doesn't get their way, and then he says, well, my mentor said this about you, and he may be accurate, or he may use it to his benefit to help him get what he wants. But he can't do that if you do not say anything negative about it. And your job, one of your roles as a mentor is to help the kid thrive where they are. So it's just simply, it'll become your mantra. I'm sorry, tell me more. How can I help you get through this? In summary, after your first year of mentoring is completed, it will be better or worse than you expected, but it won't be what you expected. But you will be better for it. Now, these are just generalities and principles, recipes, if you will. But it's up to you, like a good chef or baker or cook, it's up to you what you make of it. But I will leave this with you. You will never know what will happen if you mentor. But you will know if you don't. Kids never drift upwards. Never underestimate the value of any child. Who knows but God? He may have been waiting for centuries to do something that can only be done through that one life. In closing, watch this video.
I have spent my entire life either at the schoolhouse, on the way to the schoolhouse, or talking about what happens in the schoolhouse. Both my parents were educators. My maternal grandparents were educators. And for the past 40 years, I've done the same thing. And so needless to say, over those years, I've had a chance to look at education reform from a lot of perspectives. Some of those reforms have been good, some of them have been not so good. And we know why kids drop out. We know why kids don't learn. It's either poverty, low attendance, negative peer influences. We know why. But one of the things that we never discuss, or we rarely discuss, is the value and importance of human connection. Relationships. James Comer says that no significant learning can occur without a significant relationship. George Washington Carver says all learning is understanding relationships. Everyone in this room has been affected by a teacher or an adult. For years, I have watched people teach. I have looked at the best and I've looked at some of the worst. A colleague said to me one time, they don't pay me to like the kids. They pay me to teach a lesson. The kids should learn it. I should teach it. They should learn it. Case closed. Well, I said to her, you know, kids don't learn from people they don't like. She said, that's just a bunch of hooey. And I said to her, well, your year is going to be long and arduous, dear. Needless to say, it was. Some people think that you can either have it in you to build a relationship or you don't. I think Stephen Covey had the right idea. He said you ought to just throw in a few simple things, like seeking first to understand as opposed to being understood. Simple things like apologizing. You ever thought about that? Tell a kid you're sorry, they're in shock. I taught a lesson once on ratios. I'm not real good with math, but I was working on it. And I got back and looked at that teacher edition. I taught the whole lesson wrong. So I came back to class the next day and I said, look, guys, I need to apologize. I taught the whole lesson wrong. I'm so sorry. They said, that's okay, Miss Pearson. You were so excited. We just let you go. I have had classes that were so low, so academically deficient that I cried. I wondered, how am I going to take this group in 9 months from where they are to where they need to be? And it was difficult. It was awfully hard. How do I raise the self-esteem of a child and his academic achievement at the same time? One year I came up with a bright idea. I told all my students, you were chosen to be in my class. Because I am the best teacher and you are the best students, they put us all together so we could show everybody else how to do it. One of the students said, really? I said, really? We have to show the other classes how to do it. So when we walk down the hall, people will notice us. So you can't make noise, you just have to strut. And I gave him a saying to say, I am somebody. I was somebody when I came. I'll be a better somebody when I leave. I am powerful and I am strong. I deserve the education that I get here. I have things to do, people to impress, and places to go. And they said, yeah. You say it long enough, it starts to be a part of you. And so, I gave a quiz, 20 questions. Student missed 18. I put a +2 on this paper and a big smiley face. He said, Miss Pearson, is this an F? I said, yes. He said, then why'd you put a smiley face? I said, because you on the roll. You got 2 right, you didn't miss them all. I said, and when we review this, won't you do better? He said, yes, ma'am, I can do better. You see, -18 sucks all the life out of you. +2 said, I ain't all bad. For years, I watched my mother take the time at recess to review, go on home visits in the afternoon, buy combs and brushes and peanut butter and crackers to put in her desk drawer for kids that needed to eat, and a washcloth and some soap for the kids who didn't smell so good. See, it's hard to teach kids who stink. And kids can be cruel. And so she kept those things in her desk, and years later, after she retired, I watched some of those same kids come through and say to her, you know, Miss Walker, you made a difference in my life. You made it work for me. You made me feel like I was somebody when I knew at the bottom I wasn't. And I want you to just see what I've become. And when my mama died 2 years ago at 92, there were so many former students at her funeral. It brought tears to my eyes, not because she was gone, but because she left a legacy of relationships that could never disappear. Can we stand to have more relationships? Absolutely. Will you like all your children? Of course not. And you know your toughest kids are never absent. Never. You won't like them all, and the tough ones show up for a reason. It's the connection, it's the relationships. And while you won't like them all, the key is they can never, ever know it. So teachers become great actors and great actresses, and we come to work when we don't feel like it, and we listen to policy that doesn't make sense, and we teach anyway. We teach anyway because that's what we do. Teaching and learning should bring joy. How powerful would our world be if we had kids who were not afraid to take risks, who were not afraid to think, and who had a champion? Every child deserves a champion, an adult who will never give up on them, who understands the power of connection and insists that they become the best that they can possibly be. Is this job tough? You betcha. Oh God, you betcha. But it is not impossible. We can do this. We're educators. We're born to make a difference. Thank you so much.